The Sheppard Subway, officially known as Line 4, has long occupied an awkward and frustrating place in Toronto's transit network. Stretching just 5.5 kilometers from Sheppard-Yonge to Don Mills, it is the shortest subway line in the system. It takes barely 8 minutes end to end, and fails to do the one thing a rapid transit line should do well, which is to meaningfully connect large parts of the city together. For decades, planners, politicians, and riders have debated whether Line 4 should be extended, in which direction it should go, and whether it even makes sense to keep it as a subway at all. Today, those questions are no longer theoretical. The City of Toronto and Metrolinx are once again actively studying extensions to Line 4, and while there is still no shovel in the ground, the choices being discussed now will shape Northern Toronto's transit network for generations. As most of the recent planning work, the Sheppard Subway extension remains in the initial business case stage. This is the earliest formal step in the project development process, where multiple route options are evaluated against criteria such as ridership potential, cost, constructability, network benefits, and long-term city-building outcomes. No final alignment has been selected, no funding has been committed, and no construction timeline exists. What does exist, however, is a serious and structured examination of whether Line 4 should be extended east, west, or in both directions, and how such an extension would interact with other major transit projects that are already underway or planned across the city. At the heart of the discussion is the fact that Line 4, in its current form, does not function as a true rapid transit corridor. It operates much more like a feeder branch of Line 1, dumping riders into Yonge Sheppard and forcing them to transfer onto one of the most congested subway lines in North America. This design flaw has become more glaring as the city has grown. North York, Scarborough, and areas further east and west along Sheppard Avenue have all seen significant residential and employment growth, yet the subway that bears the corridor's name serves only a fraction of it. Any serious conversation about the future of Line 4, therefore, begins with a simple acknowledgement, which is that leaving the line as it is today is the worst possible option. One of the primary options under consideration is extending Line 4 eastward from its current terminus at Don Mills Station. This idea has deep historical roots. The original Sheppard Subway was always envisioned as the first phase of a longer east-west route, but political decisions in the 1990s and early 2000s truncated the project before it could reach Scarborough. An eastward extension would finally begin to correct that mistake. The most straightforward version of this plan would be to extend the subway east along Sheppard Avenue to meet the future Line 2 Scarborough subway extension at Sheppard and McCowan. More ambitious concept would push the line further east towards Scarborough Centre or even to Morningside Avenue, depending on how aggressively planners want to serve eastern Scarborough. The case for extending Line 4 eastwards is, on the surface, very compelling. Scarborough remains one of the most transit-dependent parts of Toronto, with many neighbourhoods relying heavily on buses that are slow, crowded, and vulnerable to traffic congestion. An eastward subway extension would provide a fast, reliable alternative and dramatically reduce travel times for residents who currently face long commutes. Connecting Line 4 directly to Line 2 at Sheppard-McCowan would also create a new inter-subway transfer point, improving network flexibility and allowing riders to bypass downtown entirely from any east-west trips. There is also a strong citywide argument for going east. Large portions of Scarborough along the Sheppard corridor are already designated for growth, with mid-rise and high-rise development planned or underway. A subway extension would support higher densities, encourage transit-oriented development, and help Scarborough evolve into a more complete and self-contained urban center rather than a bedroom community dependent on long trips to downtown. From a political standpoint, extending the subway into Scarborough also carries symbolic weight, addressing long-standing perceptions of underinvestment and inequity in transit infrastructure. However, the eastward option is not without serious challenges. Subway construction is extraordinarily expensive, and extending Line 4 eastward would involve long stretches of tunneling through areas that, while growing, are still less dense than downtown or midtown Toronto. This raises legitimate concerns about cost-effectiveness, particularly when compared to alternatives such as LRT or bus rapid transit. There is also the issue of overlap with other projects. The Line 2 Scarborough extension and the planned Eglinton East LRT already aim to improve transit access in eastern Scarborough, and planners must ensure that an eastward Line 4 extension complements rather than duplicates these investments. Another risk is that an eastward extension alone does little to fix Line 4's fundamental network weakness. Even if the subway reaches McCowan or beyond, it would still funnel riders into Line 1 at Yonge Sheppard unless a westward extension is also built. This means that while Scarborough riders might gain better access to rapid transit, congestion pressures at the Yonge line could actually worsen, undermining one of the city's biggest transit pain points. This brings us to the second major option, extending Line 4 westwards. A westward extension would take the subway from Sheppard-Yonge to Sheppard West Station, creating a second interchange with Line 1. This would fundamentally change how Line 4 functions within the TTC network. Instead of being a short spur line feeding into Yonge Street, it would become a connector between two major north-south subway corridors. Riders would be able to travel east-west across the top of the city without going anywhere near downtown, and Line 1 would gain a measure of redundancy that it currently lacks. From a network design perspective, the westward extension makes a great deal of sense. Toronto's subway system has long been criticized for its lack of grid-like connectivity, with too many trips forced through the Yonge-Bloor interchange or the downtown core. Extending Line 4 west would help address these structural weaknesses by creating a genuine east-west rapid transit link. It would also improve operational flexibility, allowing trains to be rerouted during disruptions and reducing the system-wide impact of service outages. There are also important operational benefits to a westward extension that rarely make headlines but matter enormously to the TTC. Connecting Line 4 to Sheppard West would provide direct access to the Wilson Yard, simplifying maintenance and storage operations, and reducing the complexity of moving trains between lines. Over time, this could improve reliability and reduce operating costs, strengthening the case for keeping Line 4 as a subway rather than downgrading it to another technology. Despite these advantages, the westward option faces its own criticisms. The areas west of Yonge along Sheppard Avenue are generally lower density than eastern Scarborough, and many residents already have access to Line 1. This means a westward extension might generate fewer new riders than an eastward one, raising questions about whether the investment would deliver enough immediate benefit. Critics also point out that stopping the extension at Sheppard West feels incomplete, as it does not reach major employment destinations like Pearson Airport or connect directly to regional transit hubs beyond the subway network. Perhaps the biggest drawback of building west first is political rather than technical. Scarborough has waited decades for meaningful subway expansion, and prioritizing a westward extension could be seen as favoring areas that are already relatively well served. In a city where transit decisions are deeply intertwined with perceptions of fairness and equity, this is not a trivial concern. Given the strengths and weaknesses of both directions, it is not surprising that many planners and transit advocates argue that the best long-term solution is to extend Line 4 both east and west. A fully built-out Sheppard subway running from Sheppard West to McCowan or Scarborough Centre would transform the line from a planning embarrassment into one of the most important pieces of rapid transit infrastructure in the city. It would create a true east-west spine across northern Toronto, support growth in multiple districts, and significantly improve the resilience and flexibility of the subway network as a whole. Of course, the idea of building both extensions immediately runs headfirst into the realities of funding and political will. Subway projects cost billions of dollars, take years to deliver, and compete with many other pressing infrastructure needs. It is far more likely that Line 4 would be extended in phases, with one direction prioritized first and the other following later, assuming the initial phase proves successful. So which direction should come first? If the goal is to serve underserved communities and support growth in areas that rely heavily on buses today, the case for extending eastwards is strong. An eastern extension would bring rapid transit to more people who need it the most and align with broader efforts to improve Scarborough's transit network. If, on the other hand, the priority is to fix structural problems in the subway system, relieve pressure on Line 1, and create a more resilient network, extending westwards may offer greater system-wide benefits, even if the immediate ridership gains are more modest. Ultimately, the decision will come down to what Toronto and Ontario value most in the next phase of transit expansion. Do they want to maximize ridership and equity in the short to medium term, or do they want to invest in long-term network strength and operational efficiency? The encouraging sign is that the Line 4 extension is finally being treated as a serious planning question rather than a political afterthought. While it may still be years away from construction, the conversations happening now suggest that the era of the Sheppard subway may at last long be coming to an end. In my own opinion, the very first move that Toronto should make with the Sheppard subway is extending Line 4 west from Yonge to Sheppard West Station. If we are serious about fixing the structural weaknesses in the subway network, this is the most logical and least controversial step we can take. Right now, Line 4 is functionally a dead-end branch that exists only to pour riders into the already overburdened Yonge line. By extending it west to Sheppard West, we immediately turn the Sheppard Line into a true east-west connector, giving riders a way across the top of the city without being forced through Yonge Street. That alone would make Line 4 far more useful than it is today. What makes this extension especially compelling is how straightforward it would be compared to other subway projects. The distance between Sheppard-Yonge and Sheppard West is relatively short, the corridor is already protected, and the line would largely run under a wide arterial road. There are no ravines to cross, no complicated downtown utilities to relocate, and no need to carve through dense high-rise clusters. From a construction and engineering standpoint, this is about as clean and uncomplicated as a subway extension gets in Toronto. It is hard to argue against starting with the option that delivers real network benefits without the same level of technical risk or political blowback. Just as importantly, extending Line 4 West first fixes a problem that riders feel every single day. People desperately need a reliable east-west connection in the northern part of the city, and right now that connection simply does not exist at a rapid transit level. A westward extension would give Line 4 a second interchange with Line 1, reduce pressure on Yonge by distributing riders more evenly, and make the entire subway system more resilient when disruptions happen. In my view, this is the kind of move that shows the city is thinking like a network, not just chasing ridership numbers on a single corridor. Build the west connection first, make Line 4 useful, and then expand eastward from a position of strength rather than trying to fix everything at once.
I hope that you liked the video. If so, please give it a like. If you're not subscribed and want to be notified of new videos that are released, please click on the Art Toronto button here. This is the video that I would recommend for you to watch next, and I'm sure that you're going to love it. Here's the playlist for all of the latest in transit news and views that you're going to find very informative and interesting. And finally, here is the latest video. Thanks for watching and happy transiting.